Hi everybody, this is Pito. I was starting to verify that the demo for tomorrow was going to work, and I thought I would record it so you could all see it afterwards and get my commentary. I'm going to do this in class also, but this is just a way for you to be able to view it slowly and with commentary. Okay, so I'm looking at the page, the hands-on demo at the bottom of the page, and let's start going here. So make sure I have the right version of Ruby, make a directory called my app, cd to it, and add them into it so we can edit it. And first thing I'm going to do, oops, that's not a good idea. Kill that. I should cd into it first. Now add them. Kill this, I don't need that. Kill this, I don't need that. Kill this, I don't need that yet. And now, there's nothing in the file, so first thing I'm going to do is make a gem file so we can do bundler. And I'm going to simply use my example that I worked on a little while ago to steal code from. So let's go to here, cd, and let me just go cd Sinatra enter demo, add them there, and I'll explain what I'm doing in a second. Here's the gem file. And let's go to the new one. Here's the gem file. This is a blank directory. All it's got in there is the gem file. And go back here. I'm going to do bundle, and I'm going to explain now what's going on. So bundle is going to read this gem file, and it's going to make sure all these gems are installed. Sinatra is the gem for the Sinatra framework. Active record is what we're going to use to access database. Sinatra Active Record is what interfaces between Sinatra and Active Record. PG is Postgres. I found a little bit of a problem with that. You might have hit it as well. You want to end up with this elephant thing on your toolbar, or another way to know that Postgres is running on your computer. And I also found that you had to install the gem called Postgres gem. If you had that problem, you might want to take a look at that. Okay, so then I do bundle here. It's going to just make sure that all these gems are around. And now I'm going to create my simple most Sinatra app. I'm going to type new. I'm going to give it a name, myapp.rb. And I'm going to steal a little code out of here. Here's the simplest possible one. I'm going to explain what this means in a second. So, boom. And now, if theory holds, I'm going to be able to say Ruby myapp.rb, and it's going to run. And if you look at this closely, you see that it says it's starting to listen on port 4567. So if I call up my web browser and I go 0.0.0.0, that's the IP address, 4567 is the port, and we see, boom, hello world. So what happened here? Well, first of all, we look over here, we see the log output from the web server, the Sinatra server, and you notice that it's got a couple of log entries showing that it actually received this HTTP request. It received the request for the fave icon, which the browser looks for, and finally it asks for the slash. And so how did it figure out to return hello world? Well, let's go back to our code, and we'll see that the slash, as I mentioned yesterday, the Sinatra code, it looks like a big case statement with a get method call followed by the path that we're trying to detect coming in from HTTP, and then what to return. In this case, I'm just returning straight up text, hello world, and that's why we get this effect. Pretty trivial, right? So let's make it a little bit less trivial. So I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to look at my sample code, and let's make it a little bit more complicated, okay? So I'm going to copy this code. I'm going to explain it to you in half a second. I want to do it step by step so you can follow along. Okay, so instead of this, I'm going to make it bigger. I added the debugger. I'm requiring the Sinatra gem. I'm requiring the active record interface to Sinatra. And then finally, I'm requiring a file called models.model. Now, in Sinatrao, like in any web-based system or any MVC architected system, we talk about the model being the object-oriented correspondent or representation of data coming from the database. It's a very typical way to look at things. We looked at it mentioning a directory called model, so let's create that directory here. And I'm going to go back to my crib here, and I'm going to look at models, and here's the file. It's extremely simple. I'll explain this in a second. And I'm going to say new file, and it's going to be called model.rb, and save it. Now, this is strange. This is a very, very short class. It's called model. It inherits from active record base. And essentially, this database, this class is going to be the placeholder or the representative in object-oriented, in the object-oriented sense of records inside of the database. So which database are we talking about? Well, we have to do some more setup for that. I'm going to take a look at this file, schema.rb, and migrate. Now, we're going to talk a lot more about this, so I'm just going to jump right into it. Let me create this directory, and here's the migration file. And I'm going to go to my file. I'm going to create the database directory. And within it, I'm going to create the migrate directory. And within that, I'm going to create this file with a funny name, so I'm just going to do this to remember the name. And I'm going to paste in migration. Very good. Okay, and this is basically a file that gives instructions to the database about how to create a new table or to modify an existing table in the database. So in this case, we're creating a new table called models. It's going to have just one field, which is called name. All right, so that's happening there. And one more thing we need is the config. Here we have a file called database.yml, which I'm going to also copy in the config directory. So I'm going to create a config directory here. And we're going to put in there database.yml. Which is how Active Record figures out what file or where to find the database tables. So this is part of the interface to the Postgres database system. And we see that there's two modes, the development mode and the production mode. And in this case, both of them are using Postgres. We're just going to worry about the development mode for now. So we're going to look at our Postgres here, and we're going to open it up. Look at the preferences and make sure that's all fine. Yes, that's fine. And don't check and get out of there. And what we want is another database called development. We have a database called Peter Salas, one called Postgres, one called Template1. We want one called development, which is going to be where our records for this example are stored. Before we do that, we want to make it easy for us to give these development commands, so we're going to create a file called the rake file, which is where we're going to give instructions on how to do builds and so on. Of course, it turns out that we're just going to take advantage of the Sinatrao Active Record interface, which already has those commands for us. So if I go over here, here's my rake file, I'm going to save it. I'm going to return now to my prompt, and I should be able to say rake -t. Oh yes, typo, it's called my app. Go back over here, rake-t, and we see now we have all these magical commands. We don't exactly have them. So you can see that we do this rake-t to show that it was properly installed, and it shows all the commands that are available to us. I had to make a couple of changes there during the break. I had to indicate that I want to have Postgres version 0.18 more or less, because there was a small incompatibility, but that solved the problem. You might hit that as well. Okay. So if you try to do the usual rakedb migrate to create that database, you're going to get an error because there's no database called development. So what we can do is we can say rakedb create, and it's going to create a database called development, which hopefully will appear here. There it is. And now I should be able to do rakedb migrate, which should add the appropriate columns to this. Now I'm interested that it's not running the migration. The migration worked, and my problem was that I had called the directory migrations instead of migrate, which is what it's supposed to be called. So now we have a database. We have a file called models in the model.rb, and we can now attempt to run this program and see what happens. Let's give it a shot. Ruby myapp.rb, and it looks like it came up. Let's see what happens when we go to it on in the browser, shall we? So oops, sorry. Get rid of this. And refresh. And we see an error that says no files index.erb. Yes. So let's study what's going on here. So we did a path which was just slash, which means that this is the routing block that we're going to be using. And we see this crazy statement, ERB:index. Okay, we're learning something new again. Instead of just putting the text for the HTML to be returned right in my program file, which would be probably not a scalable solution, what we're doing is we're going to use something we call views. And a view is basically a template of a series of similar pages that follow mostly the same pattern. And generally, when you're using a view, you're substituting some parts of the view with data that may come out of a database. And this is all going to become much, much clearer as we go through the course. Okay? So I'm going to go back to my crib sheet, and we're going to find a directory called views, and we're going to basically copy it. So new folder views, and in here we're going to start by simply creating index.html.erb, and we're going to steal from here actually what's in there, and go back, and I'm going to correct the naming of this file. It's just .erb, and here's the file. And if we study this, we notice a few things. First of all, this is HTML. So we notice all these little angle bracket widgets. That's telling me that that's HTML. And there's two clauses. The first one is a header, header level 3 that says welcome to Sinatra. And the second one is a form tag, which is going to be the mechanism whereby we send information back to the server. So if I now go back here and I refresh, now we see a little form. It says, welcome to Sinatra, enter model name, submit. This is how the form looks in HTML. This is how it looks on the screen. Now, I'm going to create trouble for myself because I'm going to put a new model name here called Brandeis, and I'm going to submit it, and I'm going to get a big error. Why is there a big error? Well, because we need to now tell the server what to do when it receives a post request on the submit path. So let's go back to our app.rb, and we see that actually we have that code here. There's a post. This is the second clause. Okay. And we notice that if we get a submit, we're going to create a new record in the model, and we're going to supply it one parameter, which is the model name which was given in the form, and then we will save it. And if we successfully save it, we're going to redirect to this third clause. So now we see that our server can respond to 3 different paths. The last one is simply /models, and what it's going to do is it's going to render that. And I see that it ends up looking for a view called models. So I'm going to create that view here, new file models.rv, and I'm going to steal the code from here and save it. And now when I refresh, I'm going to see that nothing has changed, and that's probably because I have to restart my server. So let's go over here, we'll kill this server, kill this too, don't need that. What we want is this one. Kill it, try it again. This is the Sinatrao server over here. And now if I go back to my browser and I refresh, I still got a problem, and so it's saying that I don't have a file called models. It's looking for a file called models in here. Model, oh, it's got to be plural, models.rb. How's that? Refresh again, and we're still not happy. That's okay, it does not make me nervous. It's called models.rb. This wants to be .erb, typo. Try it again. There we go. So we see now that this database has 2 records in it called Brandeis. That's because I was testing it and I did it twice. If we do it one more time, we're going to put in here MIT, submit, and now we have a third. So we have a very small, simple database-backed web server here with a tiny amount of code. There's my web server. That's it. So those of you who came from Rails will appreciate the simplicity of Sinatrao. Now, that simplicity comes with some baggage because when you start doing more complicated things, you have to do a lot more work. So with this ends my presentation or my demo, and also I was able to figure out a lot of problems that I was going to hit tomorrow when I demoed it to you guys. But I hope this is interesting and useful as a reference. Thanks, and as they say, good night.